when you have a population in fear, that is when you can persuade them that pretty much anything you want to do, they should acquiesce to, as long as it's being done in the name of combating that fear. There are several clear through lines that I think have defined my journalism, which has largely been devoted, if I had to pick one kind of concept that my work has been devoted to, has been the opposition to the consolidation and the acquisition of authoritarian power on the part of the state. That was what motivated me to write about politics in the first place, was my perception that basic civil liberties in the United States were being assaulted by the US government in the name of the war on terror. And so when I started deconstructing that, what I saw was that the way that that was working was that the threat of Islamic terrorism, which obviously was real, was nonetheless being wildly exaggerated, constantly drummed into people's heads, that every day you're in danger of an attack, a terrorist attack by Islamic radicals. And that put the country into fear. And when you have a population in fear, that is when you can persuade them that pretty much anything you want to do, they should acquiesce to, as long as it's being done in the name of combating that fear. And so one of the things that you have to do is convince people that that threat and that fear is being exaggerated. And if you look at the way that I've done journalism, I think one clear, consistent component has been whenever the government starts trying to make people afraid of threats, whether external threats like the threat posed by the Iraqi government, or the threat posed by the Taliban, or the threat posed by Gaddafi in Libya, or Assad in Syria, or Putin in Russia. One of the things I try and do is bring a lot of skepticism to those claims, and to ask whether these threats are being exaggerated to put people in fear so that they accept more authoritarian power, or whether the threat is being accurately described. And obviously when it came to the Trump era, things like Russiagate, trying to convince Americans that Russia was subverting our democracy through disinformation, or the threat of the Trump campaign itself, that this was a criminal insurrectionary movement, all of which was about demanding more power over the internet or law enforcement investigations as a way of protecting people from that threat. One of the things I did was try and say the threat posed by Russia, the threat posed by Trump's movement, was being wildly exaggerated, in fact, often fabricated as a way of gaining more power. That has been the consistent focus of my journalism from the very start. Obviously, the NSA surveillance programs that we exposed, the mass surveillance on American citizens, that too was justified in the name of all sorts of fears. Oh, we have to do this to keep people safe from terrorism, to keep them safe from pedophilia. Every threat was hauled out. And so one of the things we had to do in that reporting was demonstrate that the NSA's strategy, as demonstrated by the documents we're revealing, was to constantly try and keep that fear heightened in the minds of Americans so that they would succumb to the powers of the NSA.